right, so in this part of the webinar, we are going to talk about how teachers can courageously lead in their classrooms with their students. As I have stated, I am not an educator, and so for the duration of the webinar, Erin is going to be here helping us and giving us the educator perspective. And so there is a very specific quote that goes really well with this from Brene Brown's K-12 Leadership Hub called Daring Classrooms, and it will be linked on the resource page at the end of the webinar as well. But it is as follows. We must be guardians of spaces that allow students to breathe, be curious, and to explore the world and be who they are without suffocation. So we know that when students enter classrooms that there may be things going on in their lives that they don't want to share with their teacher or maybe even with their classmates. But when they're in that space, teachers want that student to be able to excel to their highest potential, and they want to be able to support them in whatever way they need to be supported. And so those students and the skills that they have deserve to be celebrated in those spaces. So Erin, how do we think teachers can do this?
Yeah, well, I have not been teaching for a super long time, but I definitely know between just talking to other colleagues and since when I was in high school personally that the amount of baggage that students are bringing into the classrooms now, it's insane. They have so much more to worry about at home, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of access they have on social media, as well as changing family dynamics in our classrooms today. So they have so much more that they're bringing into us, and in order for them to still succeed at a high level, we have to really get them into that comfort zone. You can't take them from the comfort zone to the learning zone without first developing that comfort zone and developing the trusting, authentic relationships that are crucial to teaching students. You can't just jump into the learning without taking care of all that first. So in classrooms today, a really popular buzzword is social-emotional learning. That has been a topic of professional development throughout school districts for the past couple of years. The roots actually originate with Plato, who was talking about SEL back hundreds of thousands of years ago, when he was talking about the concepts of holistic life and maintaining a balance between your morals and your physical fitness and also your academics. So he was already going on about that. When we have translated that with some 1960s research out of Yale to create the concepts that we know of social emotional learning today. So CASEL, which is the Collaborative to Advance Social and Emotional Learning, they pretty much defined the 5 tenets of what it means to have a social emotional learning based classroom. Those are going to be linked on the resource page as well, but those are probably pretty familiar to you. So the 5 tenets are self-awareness, knowing your personal strengths and limitations, self-management, being able to effectively and efficiently manage stress and impulse behaviors and stuff. Social awareness, which is understanding the perspective of others, listening, making sure that you're hearing what they're saying, not just thinking about what you're going to talk about. Relationship skills, communicating, listening, clearly speaking. And then finally, responsible decision making. So making decisions with pretty solid knowledge about what all the consequences might be. And we teach these in our classrooms, we develop these in our students, but it's really important also to think about how those impact ourselves as teachers. But right now we're going to focus on just how it impacts our students. So we'll get into that in the next section. Teachers can best meet some of these tenets by focusing on the experience of students in the classroom. And when I say experience, I want to break it down really quickly into 2 different things, the environmental experience and the personal experience. Environmental is pretty easy. So when your student walks into your classroom, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? If you were walking into your classroom as a student, would the adjectives come to mind be something like cold, cramped, stressful, really bright lights? How can you change those perceptions, those adjectives of your classroom to better impact your students? I'm a huge fan of flexible learning, or flexible seating, but I know it's not always possible for teachers because of budgets, because of space, and also a lot of teachers are mobile, so they're going to different classrooms throughout the day. Even if you are mobile, or if you don't have the ability to have flexible seating in your classroom, there are still some things that you can do in your space to really kind of create an environment that doesn't stress students out, that doesn't seem outdated, that really kind of helps each student learn in their own individual ways. Some ways you can do that include changing the desks into a circle shape instead of into the rows, or groups, using lighting really intentionally. So if you don't need the bright lights on while students are working on their computers, and you can cut down some of that stimuli, turn off the lights. Use music intentionally. If a student is reading something out loud, you can play some dramatic music behind it to really make the students feel the text more, or even in transitions. Like, by the time this song is over, I expect you guys to be doing XYZ. Those are some really great ways that you can change the environment to encourage authentic, collaborative, vulnerable settings. The second key concept of your experience is the personal experience. So how do your interactions with students either help or take away from their learning experience? This is where you are modeling courageous leadership for your students. They're not going to be able to embody these tenets themselves unless they're really seeing how that example is impacting their lives. Some ways you can do that include being authentic in front of your students. We're not actors and actresses. Students know when we feel emotions that we're not telling them. So really just opening up to them and allowing them into that space just a little bit, that goes a long way with your students. Leaning into tough conversations, whether it's with involving your content or it's involving one-to-one conferences with your students. Have one-to-one conferences with your students all the time, because that's really how you develop that meaningful relationship. And allow multiple opportunities for students to do independent exploration of a topic. That allows both you to learn about what your students are passionate about and allow your students to really solidify that passion in themselves at an early age. The tenets of courageous leadership are truly designed to help you be better for your students, with your students. If they'll see if they're being left out of the equation, and that's going to have a negative impact. That's not the whole point of this webinar. So really going out of your way to involve them in this process as you're growing into this mold or this ideal, that's going to be really important for them to see as they progress.